She didn't cry when he pushed her out. She cried when the door didn't open again. The solid click of the deadbolt felt more final than the wedding vows he'd whispered to her 2 years ago, the ones that promised shelter and safety. Now, the only thing between her and the biting November wind was a thin cardigan and the ghost of a promise. He'd thrown the chipped ceramic bowl after her. It shattered on the pavement, splattering the last of the beef stew near her worn-out sneakers. "There," her husband, Mark, had screamed, his face a mask of purple rage. "Go feed the homeless with that." Her crime? She had given a full bowl of the dinner she'd spent all afternoon simmering to the old man who slept on a bench in the park across the street. A man whose eyes looked so tired, so empty, that she couldn't bear it. Mark had seen her from the window, and his pride, a fragile, vicious thing, had snapped. It wasn't about the food. It was about the shame he felt seeing his wife associate with that. Now, standing on the cold curb, a deep, protective ache pulsed in her womb. 7 months pregnant. Alone. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, a silent promise to the life stirring within her. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll fix this." But how? Mark had her wallet, her phone, everything. He had systematically stripped her of her independence over the years, masking it as love, as a way of taking care of her. Now she saw it for what it was, a cage, and he had just thrown away the key. Some of us know what it's like to be loyal and left behind anyway. It's a special kind of cold that seeps into your bones when the person who is supposed to be your harbor becomes the storm. Clara walked. She had no destination. The city lights blurred into a watercolor of indifference. She passed laughing couples, warm families heading home, each a tiny dagger to her heart. She ended up, inevitably, at the park. There, on the same bench, sat the old man. He looked up as she approached, his face etched with concern. He was holding the empty, unbroken bowl she had given him earlier, cradling it like a precious thing. He must have heard the shouting. "He shouldn't have done that to you, child," he said to her, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He wasn't looking at her face, but at the swell of her belly. "Not with the little one on the way." A sob finally broke free from Clara's chest, a ragged, painful sound. He didn't flinch. He just watched her, his gaze steady. Then he did something that broke the pattern of her despair. He slowly, deliberately, began to unfold the threadbare wool blanket he was wrapped in. It was stained and smelled of rain and earth, but he folded it neatly and held it out to her. "You need this more than I do," he said, his eyes meeting hers. There was no pity in them. There was something else. A quiet, profound dignity. She stared at the offered blanket, then at him. A kind gesture had cost her everything, and now a stranger with nothing was offering her his only source of warmth. This is what Mark called shame? This quiet, heartbreaking grace? If you've ever been punished for being kind, like this video so others see it too. Clara shook her head, wiping her tears. "I can't, that's all you have." Sometimes, all you have is exactly what you're meant to give away. The word settled over her, a strange sort of peace in the midst of her panic. She sat on the cold bench, a careful distance from him, and pulled her thin cardigan tighter. For a few minutes they sat in silence, two outcasts under the pale glow of a street lamp. The tension in her shoulders began to ease, just slightly. Maybe she could just rest here for a bit, catch her breath. But the night wasn't done with her. Headlights cut through the darkness of the park, sweeping across the lawn. A familiar, expensive purr of an engine grew closer. It was Mark's car. It slowed to a crawl beside the curb. Clara's heart leaped into her throat. Was he back? Had he cooled down? A desperate, foolish hope flickered inside her. The passenger window slid down. Mark wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the old man, a sneer twisting his lips. "Hey, old-timer, found yourself a girlfriend? Hope you two enjoy the 5-star accommodations." Ha ha ha. He laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. Then he looked directly at Clara, his eyes like chips of ice. "Don't even think about coming back. I've already packed your things. They're in a trash bag on the porch, where they belong." The car sped off, leaving a cloud of exhaust and humiliation. The flicker of hope inside Clara died, turning to ash. She thought that was the worst of it. She was wrong. The true pattern break, the moment the world tilted on its axis, was yet to come. The old man, who had remained silent throughout Mark's tirade, slowly got to his feet. He wasn't looking at Clara. He was staring down the street where Mark's car had disappeared, a strange, calculating light in his clear eyes. The frail, tired demeanor he'd worn before had vanished, replaced by an unnerving stillness. "He shouldn't have done that to you," he repeated, but this time his voice held a different quality. It was no longer the gravelly rumble of a broken man. It was the low, resonant hum of authority. He reached into his pocket, and Clara flinched, expecting she didn't know what. But it wasn't a flask or a crumpled dollar bill he pulled out. It was a phone. A sleek, modern smartphone that looked utterly alien in his calloused hand. He tapped the screen once, his thumb moving with a purpose that sent a shiver down Clara's spine. He put it to his ear. "James," he said, his voice crisp and clear. "I need a location and asset check on a Mark Peterson. License plate 8KL355. Yes, right now. And bring the car around to Oakwood Commons, north entrance. I'm finished here." Clara stared, her mind struggling to connect the dots. James? Asset check? The car? She watched, frozen, as he ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He turned to Clara, and the old man was gone. In his place stood someone else, someone whose posture was straighter, whose gaze was sharper. "My name is Elias Vance, and I apologize for the deception. It's an experiment of mine, to see the world from a different perspective." Clara couldn't speak. Her brain was short-circuiting. An experiment? Who is this man? Before she could form a question, a silent, gleaming black Bentley pulled up to the curb, its engine a whisper. A man in a sharp suit, James, stepped out of the driver's side and opened the rear door, his expression impassive. "Mr. Vance," James said with a nod. "The vehicle is registered to Mark Peterson, Jr., executive at Sterling Thorne Investments. We hold the majority share of that company." "Wait, what?" Elias Vance nodded slowly, his eyes still on Clara. "I see." He then looked at Clara, whose face was a canvas of shock and confusion. "Clara," he said, gesturing to the open car door. The plush leather interior glowed under the park lights. "Please, let me help you. You showed me kindness when you thought I had nothing. Let me show you my gratitude now that you know I have everything." Sterling Thorne Investments, Mark's company, the one he was so proud of, the one he lorded over her as proof of his superiority. And this man in the tattered coat, owned it? The world wasn't just tilted, it had flipped completely upside down. Comet karma, if you believe life always comes full circle. Claire felt like she was in a dream. She allowed Elias to guide her into the warmth of the Bentley, the door closing with a soft, expensive thud that shut out the world of cold benches and colder husbands. James drove them away from the park, away from the life that had crumbled just an hour before. They drove in silence for a while, the city streaking by in a river of light. Claire clutched the faded Ankara cloth bag she had managed to grab, the one her mother gave her. Inside was a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, her only real possession now. I don't understand, she whispered, looking at the man beside her. He had taken off the tattered coat, and underneath he wore a simple but well-made dark sweater. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a face that showed lines of weariness but also of immense strength. I lost my wife a few years ago. After she passed, the world, it became a series of boardrooms and balance sheets, echoing rooms and empty handshakes. I felt like I was losing touch with the humanity she always cherished. So once a year, for a week, I leave it all behind. No money, no name. I just exist, to remember what's real. Most people walk past. They see the rags, not the man. But you didn't. You saw a person who was hungry, and you fed him. You didn't ask for a thank you. You just gave. He reached over and gently took the chipped bowl from her lap, the one she'd been given back. He ran a thumb over the rim. "This stew," he said, a small smile touching his lips. "It was the best meal I've had in a long, long time. It tasted like kindness." Tears pricked Clara's eyes again, but this time, they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of a strange, overwhelming relief. She had been punished for the very thing that had just saved her. They arrived at a penthouse suite that overlooked the entire city, a palace of glass and steel. Elias ensured she had everything she needed: a warm room, soft clothes, a meal prepared by a private chef. But all Clara wanted was to sleep. She curled up in a bed that felt like a cloud, and for the first time in months, she felt safe. Not because of the luxury, but because for the first time her compassion wasn't a liability. It was an asset. The next morning, she woke to the sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. On a table beside the bed was a tray with breakfast and a single sealed envelope. Her name was written in elegant script. Inside was a deed to a charming two-bedroom house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. And beneath it, a bank statement for a trust fund set up in her name and the name of her unborn child. The number had so many zeros she couldn't count them. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note from Elias. "Clara, true wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give. You gave when you had little, and you deserve a life where you never have to worry again. This is not charity. It is a return on an investment you made in humanity. Your child will be born into a world of kindness because you, its mother, never stopped believing in it. You are worth more than this, but it's a start." From Elias. She sat there, the papers trembling in her hand, and she finally broke. Not in pieces, but open. Like a dam bursting, all the pain, the fear, and the humiliation washed out of her, replaced by a flood of pure, unadulterated hope. This wasn't just her story. It was for anyone who ever chose kindness when the world showed them cruelty. 2 days later, her phone rang. It was a new one, provided by Elias. The caller ID was blocked, but she knew who it was. She answered. "Clara? Oh, thank God. Clara, where are you?" It was Mark. His voice was frantic, desperate. "I'm safe," she said, her own voice calm and steady. It was a voice he'd never heard before. "Clara, I got fired. They called me in this morning. Something about conduct unbecoming an employee of Sterling Thorne. They said the new majority shareholder was displeased. I don't understand. I need you. Our baby needs me." She looked out the window at the sprawling city below. She was no longer a part of his small, suffocating world. She was above it. "No, Mark," she said, the words clear and final. "Our baby needs a mother who knows her own worth. and I'm finally learning what that is." She remembered him throwing her wedding ring into the fire that one time, a symbolic gesture of his power over her. "Go feed the homeless with that," he'd sneered. And in a way, she had. She had offered a different kind of value, compassion, and it had been returned to her 1,000-fold. She hung up the phone. She didn't block his number. She simply knew she would never need to answer it again. Months later, Clara stood on the steps of a newly renovated building. A sign was being mounted above the door. The Clara House, a haven for mothers and children. With Elias's guidance and funding, she had created the very thing she had needed that night, a safe harbor. She held her beautiful, healthy baby girl in her arms, bundled in a soft blanket. Elias stood beside her, looking not like a billionaire, but like a proud grandfather. He handed her a small, gift-wrapped box. Inside was the chipped ceramic bowl, now perfectly repaired with shimmering gold lacquer, a Japanese art form called kintsugi. The cracks were not hidden, they were highlighted, a testament to the idea that something is more beautiful for having been broken. "To remind you," Elias said softly, "that your scars are what make you strong." Clara looked from the golden-seamed bowl to her daughter's sleeping face, to the sanctuary she had built from the rubble of her old life. She hadn't just been saved that night in the park. She had been found. She had traded a house built on shame for a home built on grace. And finally she understood. The greatest act of revenge is not to destroy, but to build something beautiful in the place you were broken. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope right now.